Hello and welcome to Baiju's Exam Prep IAS. A very warm good morning to everyone. I hope all of you are doing good. I welcome you all to class number 4 of governance. Good morning, good morning, good morning, everyone. Good morning, guys. Good morning, good morning, good morning. I hope all of you are doing good. We'll wait for a few minutes, let everyone join the class, and then we'll begin. Thank you so much. Thank you. All right, then. Good morning once again, and I welcome you all back. I hope all of you are doing good. As I said earlier, this is class number 4 of governance. We have already had 3 classes so far. In case you did not attend any of the earlier classes or you missed on any of the earlier classes, please do see the recorded version so that you can be up to date with that. We'll quickly revise what we studied yesterday in class number 3 and then we'll continue from there. In class number 3, if you remember, we had started our discussion about corruption in India. We started our discussion about the different types of issues that we have specifically with respect to the Prevention of Corruption Act. Now, in the Prevention of Corruption Act specifically, there have been certain changes made in 2019, 2018, sorry. Apart from that, we discuss how there are three different types of offenses in this particular act, that is taking a bribe or criminal misconduct or disproportionate asset. We discussed how the law was changed mainly in the year 2019. There were certain changes that were made. For example, now giving a bribe also is an offense. Apart from that, now we have also seen the fact that if an officer does not perform the functions dishonestly, in case the officer has not performed the function dishonestly, it would not be considered as an offense. Apart from that, we have also seen how we have to take government's permission for prosecution. The cases of the Prevention of Corruption Act have to be resolved within 2 years of the time. After 2 years, they might extend it to 6 months at a time for maximum of 4 years. We also saw that in case of starting an investigation, there is no time period within which the government has to give the permission. But to start the prosecution, the government has to give permission within 3 months, or they can extend it to 1 more month. These are some of the things that we had discussed. These were the preventions. Then there were again new changes that were introduced in 2019. Apart from that, we started our discussion about the Lokpal and the Lokayuktas. We discussed how the Lokpal works at the center level while the Lokayuktas work at the state level. Lokpal and Lokayukt mainly are anti-corruption officers. These are the officers that are supposed to fight against corruption cases, that are supposed to take up investigation into corruption cases specifically. We discuss about their history, about how Lokpal's demand was made in starting from 1960s itself, but the government was never serious about the demand. The reason being that government did not want an officer that will look into their own activities. How Lokpal is different from other agencies? Number one, Lokpal is independent from political control. It does not come under any ministry as such. It does not have any political members as such. Lokpal also, in certain cases, can investigate the prime minister, but only in very, very few cases can the Lokpal do that. The Lokpal can also go ahead and give orders to the CBI. If a CBI officer is investigating a case given by the Lokpal, that CBI officer cannot be transferred. All these things that we had seen were with respect to the Lokpal. Now, there were certain things about the Lokpal that were remaining, so we'll go to that quickly. We were here. I think, yeah. So this is where we were when we had last studied about the Lokpal yesterday. As I told you earlier as well, whenever we have a new agency, whenever we have any new law that is created in India, the expectations from the side of the people are that now that the new law is created, now that this new body is created, everything will change. There are always a lot of expectations. People are extremely optimistic. People think that just by bringing a new law or new bodies created, everything will change in India, corruption will end. The same happened with Lokpal as well. When Lokpal was first introduced, or when the demand for Lokpal was being made, it was thought that Lokpal is the answer to all our problems. It was thought that once the Lokpal comes into the picture, we will have everything sorted in our country. However, the reality is far from that. In reality, if you see, after so many years of Lokpal, we still do not have any high profile case solved by the Lokpal. We still do not have the Lokpal being able to solve any big issue. Has corruption ended in India? Has corruption become zero? No. We still have issues of corruption. Has our life become perfect? No, obviously not. Has corruption at the higher level stopped entirely? Obviously not. But even then, you do not see the Lokpal actually bringing out any important judgment. In fact, ever since the Lokpal has been created, we have not seen any, even one single high profile case being investigated by the Lokpal. You might see a few cases here and there investigated by the Lokpal, but those are not very relevant. And that is why a lot of people criticize the government also saying that the government may have not given enough powers to the Lokpal, and people criticize the Lokpal as well. Because all the expectations that we had from the Lokpal, none of those expectations actually have been fulfilled. None of those expectations have been put into the use. In reality, none of the high profile cases have been solved here. As you can see here, Lokpal fails to sanction the prosecution of nearly anyone in 3 years since its formation. It's an old news, but even then, we are in the middle of 2024. Even till now, we do not see any significant or any high profile case that the Lokpal had actually investigated or the Lokpal had actually concluded. I'll show you one very interesting tweet. You might have heard of this person named Ashok Khemka. I'm sure many of you might have heard his name, Ashok Khemka. Remember the IAS officer who is very famous or infamous rather for getting transferred multiple times? Have you heard his name? Haryana cadre IAS officer, someone who gets transferred, who holds a record for getting transferred over 60 times. Whenever any government comes to power, he starts to take action. He is very, very famous or infamous rather for getting transferred time and time again. Every few months, this guy gets transferred because apparently, again, I don't know the fact or anything else, but apparently the image that he has is that he goes after the politicians, he goes after anyone who has connections, he does not really give them any leverage, and they basically get him transferred. For example, it said that he was the one who investigated Robert Vadra, the son-in-law of Sonia Gandhi. Robert Vadra's land deals, that he got a lot of land in Haryana at a very, very low cost. He was the one who started investigating the case. So he is extremely used to getting transferred time and time again. Look at the tweet that he did. Because he got transferred so many times, now he does not really care about what the government will think about him. So look at what tweet he did. His tweet is, with CVC, CIC, Lokpal, Lokayukt in place, the corrupt must be shivering. Are they? The real test is how many corrupt people are convicted, how many corrupt are left off, how many innocent are harassed. Means everyone accepts and understands the fact that even after Lokpal or CIC or CVC or Lokayukt, the amount of laws that we should have are very high, but the amount of justice or the amount of work done by them is not up to the mark. Now, one more thing about the Lokpal that we did not discuss yesterday. As I told you earlier as well, when the law about the Lokpal was created, the one biggest controversy about the Lokpal was whether Prime Minister should come under the Lokpal or not. The team of Anna Hazare and other people who were demanding a strong Lokpal, they wanted Prime Minister also to be under the Lokpal. In other words, they wanted that people should be able to file a complaint against the Prime Minister as well in the Lokpal. On the other hand, the political class, the politicians did not like it. The politicians thought that if the Prime Minister is under the Lokpal, it is actually giving too much power to the Lokpal. The Lokpal can then misuse this power, the Lokpal can blackmail using this power, and that is why there was a compromise formula reached. The compromise formula was that Prime Minister will be under the Lokpal, but only in very few scenarios. For example, if the Prime Minister takes any decision with respect to India's international relations, our external or internal security, our public order, atomic energy, and space. If the Prime Minister takes decisions on any of these matters, these will be outside the purview of Lokpal. These will be outside the purview of Lokpal. Means in these cases, the Lokpal cannot register any complaint for the Prime Minister. Apart from this, if any other decision, now if you think of it, most of the work of the Prime Minister is covered under this, then what remains? What remains is, for example, policy decisions. Certain policy decisions, certain contracts, etc., being given, those kind of things can be considered under Lokpal, but most of the work of the Prime Minister under these categories cannot be questioned by the Lokpal. Not just this, to ensure that the Prime Minister can work without being targeted by the Lokpal, that the Prime Minister is not blackmailed by the Lokpal, there are certain strict conditions that are put in place. What are those conditions? First, full bench of the Lokpal consisting of chairman and all the members should first meet to consider initiation of the inquiry. Means if someone files a complaint against the Prime Minister, the first step is the chairman of the Lokpal and all the other members, all of them should first sit together and they should first decide whether or not we should have an inquiry against the Prime Minister or not. In that, at least two-thirds of the people should first say yes. Only if two-thirds of the total people say yes, we should have an inquiry against the Prime Minister, only in that case we should go ahead and start the inquiry against the Prime Minister. After that, any such inquiry shall be done in camera. Now, when you say in camera, what you mean is not live on TV. It's not that you can watch on TV. In camera basically means there should be a proper video record so that later on there is an evidence who spoke what, which member gave what input, which member was in favor, which member was against it, so on and so forth. All of that should be in camera so that there is proper evidence. There is proper evidence, no one can then lie later. So everything against the Prime Minister, if it is happening in the Lokpal, any inquiry is being done, all of that should be done in a camera. Then, if the Lokpal concludes, the Lokpal thinks that allegations are false, that whatever blame is given on the Prime Minister is false, whatever complaint is being done is false, inquiry should be dismissed. Not just this, records of the inquiry also should not be published or made available to anyone. This is important. In case the inquiry finds out that Prime Minister is not guilty, whatever complaints are done against the Prime Minister are false, these are false allegations, then obviously nothing will happen to the Prime Minister, number one. But second and most importantly, there should be no record kept of this investigation. There should be no record kept. No one should be able to see this. No one should be able to access this. This again is done to give enough protection to the Prime Minister so that the Prime Minister is not burdened by the Lokpal. The Prime Minister is not kind of put under pressure by the Lokpal. That is how the Lokpal's office will work for the Prime Minister as well. Now, just like we have the Lokpal at the center level, we have the Lokayuktas at the state level, but this is not important for the exam. The reason is, in the UPSC exam, you do not see state-wise questions being asked. In the UPSC exam, they will focus on the center government authorities, on what happens at the center government level. So Lokpal is important, Lokayukta is not that important because in every state, we have a different Lokayukta. How? See, in 2013, the Lokpal Act was passed. We discussed this yesterday, how the Lokpal Act was passed in 2013. Now, if you see the Lokpal Act of 2013, before that itself, many states had already made their Lokayukta. For example, states such as Odisha, Maharashtra, they have had a Lokayukta for such a long time. Since 1970s, they have already had their Lokayukta. Then in 2013, when the Lokpal Act was passed, in the act it was written that if any state does not have a Lokayukta already, again it said, the act said if a state does not have a Lokayukta already, then they should appoint a Lokayukta now. So now we do have Lokayukts as per this act, but again, many states had a Lokayukta before that as well. Because many states have their own law about the Lokayukta, what has happened is different states have different powers of the Lokayukta. Some states have given a lot of power to the Lokayukta. Some other states have not given it a lot of power. For example, some states have given the power to Lokayukta to take action against their chief minister, to take action against their minister. Some other states have not given the power. Also, some states have even appointed a new position called the Up Lokayukta or the Deputy Lokayukta, while some other states have not given this power to their Lokayukta. So, as I said, Lokayuktas are not important for the exam. The reason is that they have a different structure in different states. Different structure in different states. And when there is a law or there's an authority that is different in different states, that is not relevant for our examination, because again, you don't have to learn about every single state specifically. As you can see here, there are variations in different states. In states such as Assam, Karnataka, Andhra, they have Lokayukt, and Up-Lokayukta is also a new position that they have inaugurated. Up-Lokayukt or Deputy Lokayukt has also been appointed. On the other hand, states such as Bihar, Punjab, Tamil Nadu, West Bengal, they only have a Lokayukt, they do not have a Up-Lokayukt. Appointment process is again usually like this, but again it can change for different states. You don't have to worry about that because, as I said, Lokayuktas are not that relevant. Qualifications are also different in different states. Focus only on the Lokpal and not on the Lokayuktas. Tenure, mostly most of the states is 5 years, and for 65 years they can work, after which they retire, and they are not eligible to work after their retirement. These are the investigations that they can take up. Some states have given the Lokayuktas a lot more power than the others. For example, in certain states, Lokayuktas can start their complaint by themselves, or in certain other states, the Lokayuktas can only start if they have been given some complaint by the people. For example, in states such as Himachal Pradesh, Uttar Pradesh, Assam, they cannot start investigation by themselves. In these states, for example, they can only start investigation if someone has actually filed a complaint. In some other states, they can start investigation by themselves. So there are variations in the way that they work. There are variations in the structure of the program of this Uplokayukt as well. What are the kind of complaints that can be registered is also different for different states. In some states, they can only have complaints where you file an issue against corruption. If there are corruption related cases, only then you can file a complaint in certain cases. But in certain other states, they have also given the power for grievance redressal. Please understand, this is an important phrase that you will hear time and time again in Indian polity. Grievance redressal. Grievance redressal basically means, for example, the government promised a service to you. Let's say the government promised to you that if you fill up this form, you will get a scholarship. And the scholarship amount will be given to your bank account within 15 days, 1 5. Now you have filled up the form, you have filled up all the formalities, 15 days have already passed, but even then you do not get the money in your account. Then what do? You want to file a complaint. This is called grievance redressal. Grievance means a complaint. That something was promised to you but it has not been delivered. That is called a grievance or a complaint. Grievance redressal means to file a complaint or to file an issue against this complaint to get this resolved. So in certain states, the Lokayuktas can take up these matters as well. Like, for example, at the center level, the Lokpal does not do that. At the center level, you can't file a grievance redressal with the Lokpal. At the center level, the Lokpal only looks into corruption related issues. If there is corruption in a certain area, then the Lokpal will look into it. If there is no corruption, the Lokpal will not look into it. But at the state level, certain Lokayuktas have been given this power as well to look into grievance redressal, to look into whether or not the complaints that have been filed or whether or not the promises that have been given by the government to the people have they been fulfilled or not. Now, I'll give you one interesting example of what happened a few years back. An example of Kerala. Now, Kerala is usually a state that remains at a very high position in most of the indices. Human Development Index, literacy rate, etc. Within the country, you see Kerala being right there at the top. Kerala projects itself as a model state in many ways. Kerala has their own Lokayukta as well. The interesting part is when Kerala made their Lokayukta law, They wanted to show the country that, see, we are such a advanced state that our law of the Lokayukta will be the most powerful. So when Kerala made their Lokayukta law, what they did was they gave the Lokayukta a lot of powers. So much powers that Kerala's Lokayukt could even dismiss ministers. Please understand the difference. In case of the Lokpal can only recommend action to be taken. If the Lokpal thinks that someone is guilty of corruption, if the Lokpal investigates a matter and finds someone guilty, the Lokpal cannot remove them by himself. The Lokpal can only suggest or recommend to the central government that the person should be removed. They can only recommend. While the person has to be removed or not, that decision is to be taken by the government. But in case of Kerala, what they did was they gave Lokayukta so much power that they said the Lokayukta can straight away dismiss the minister. So what happened was the Lokayukta in Kerala in 2021 dismissed the education minister of Kerala. Understand, the education minister in Kerala was dismissed because apparently there was some scam in which his name had come out. Next year, 2022, the Lokayukta of Kerala started an investigation against the chief minister himself. Kerala's Lokayukta started an investigation against the Kerala chief minister. Now, what happened was when the Lokayukta started investigation against the chief minister himself, the chief minister got scared. Why? Because again, the chief minister thought if he can remove my education minister tomorrow, he can remove me also. So chief minister got very scared. Chief minister then very quickly changed the law. Chief Minister of Kerala, along with his party, they passed a law in the Kerala Assembly changing the powers of the Lokayukta, saying that Lokayukta cannot dismiss the ministers. Why? They said that it is against the constitution. They said that the Lokayukta of Kerala cannot dismiss the ministers. Why? Because the power to dismiss the ministers is only given to the governor as per the constitution. The state said that the power to dismiss the governor should not be with the Lokayukt because this power should be, or this power as per the constitution, is with the governor. Now, the most interesting part is it was the same government, same party, same government that had first introduced this law in Kerala. And that same government now is saying that no, 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 our law is bad, our law is wrong, we should remove it, it is against the constitution. This is how funny the politics becomes sometimes. That the same party that introduced the law, the same party who said, oh, our law is so great, it is a model law for all the other states, they should follow it. The same party, the same government had to change the law because they thought that now their positions are in danger. Now the party says that no, we cannot have this law, this is against the constitution because it is a governor that can dismiss the ministers and not the Lokayuktas. And that is how it was seen. Now, this is again a case study. It's an interesting example to understand how the state politics works. In many other states, the states have been extremely careless about the Lokayukt. Many states in India have either not appointed a Lokayukt for many years, or in some states, even if they do appoint a Lokayukt, they don't really remove them after the tenure is over. There are many examples of the Lokayuk just continuing for many years even after their tenure is over. Because people don't pay attention mostly to what is happening at the state level. In 2018, the Supreme Court had said that Jammu Kashmir, Manipur, Meghalaya, Mizoram, Tamil Nadu, Tripura, West Bengal, etc. had not appointed any Lokayukt or Up-Lokayukt. The Supreme Court had asked the state governments to give a response as to why have they not done that. Now, this is not uncommon, unfortunately. Usually, the institutions at the center government level are still well run as compared to the institution at the state government level. I'll give you a simple example. Despite all this news of paper leak, despite all this news of corruption in different exams, touchwood, we have not seen any issue in the UPSC exam so far. The UPSC exam, despite its large scale, despite lakhs and lakhs of people appearing for it, the UPSC exam does not have that kind of an issue. But if you look at our history, look at the history of state PCS. In every single state PCS, sometime in the past, in our history, sometime or the other, there have been allegations of corruption. There have been allegations of corruption in almost every single state PCS. Look at Bihar PCS, look at Assam PCS, in every single state UP PCS, there are allegations that paper has been leaked or the result is compromised, etc. Because again, the institutions at the center government level are in a much more limelight. They are answerable to the Supreme Court. At the state level, we do not see the kind of scrutiny. And that is why at the state level, the kind of work ethic is not the same. And there are so many other examples. We studied in the first class about the Central Information Commission. Central Information Commission works at the center government level. Yes, they do not have full member quota, many seats are vacant. But if you look at the working of state information commissions, the working of state information commission is even worse. In many of the state information commission, even the chairman is not appointed for many years. So the working of these institutions at the state government level is even far worse as compared to the working at the center government level. And the same is the case when you compare Lokpal and the Lokayuktas. I'll give you another example of what happened in Uttar Pradesh. Now, in Uttar Pradesh, just as I told you, in many states, the Lokayuktas, even after they complete their tenure, they are not removed by the government. Why? Because the government thinks that, oh, this officer is friendly to us, this officer does not investigate any case against us. Why to remove him? Let him continue on his job. This, in fact, happened in UP. In case of Uttar Pradesh, their Lokayukta was so friendly to the government that their Lokayukta was allowed to continue for 9 years. Despite the tenure being 5 years only, the Lokayukta in UP continued in his post for 9 years. The government was not ready to remove him. It was a Samajwadi government at that point of time. Akhilesh Yadav was the chief minister. Despite many people arguing, despite the court also interfering, asking the government to remove him, they were not ready to remove the Lokayukta and he continued. Finally, the Supreme Court got so angry that they removed the Lokayukta and they appointed a new Lokayukta who was the retired judge of the UP High Court. So, as you can see here, Lokayuktas of different states have been under controversy for different reasons. I gave you a couple of examples of Kerala and of UP. These controversies have not started for the Lokpal, but again, the point is Lokpal is pretty new and we have not seen the Lokpal do any significant work so far anyway. This was our class number 3 that has now ended. Before we start our next module, that is module number 4, I'll take up a few questions to clarify your doubts and then we'll go ahead. Devansh is saying for current officers without any permission prophecy. Devansh, I'm not sure what your question is. If your question is regarding Kerala, in the current form, the Lokayukta can only recommend action. Then Tazain has a question. In Lokayukta, do they have to take permission for investigation from the government of state? Tazain, as I have been saying repeatedly time and time again, Lokayuktas are different in different states. So every state has a different type of a law and you can't remember that. So in some states, they might have to take permission. In some states, they might not have to take permission. Mr. Bhuvnesh, if you keep on copy pasting one question every single time, I will not reply to it. I can see your question in first instant itself. Just copy pasting it time and time again will only lead to hiding other people's messages. So I would recommend you not to type the same thing time and time again. Because I have my glasses on, I can read it in the first instant itself. So don't worry, when the time is right, when your turn is in the chat, I will answer that question. Okay? No point copy pasting it time and time again. The question is Lokayukta important for Haryana PC, any other state PCS? I don't know. I don't read the PCS exam, but I'm assuming it's important, so you can read about it. Gagan is saying, what is the purpose of making Lokpal and the Lokayuk in recommendatory nature and not enforceable? Gagan, understand this. You are the government. If you are the government, why would you want to make any authority that is so powerful that they can remove your officers? No government would want to do that. Every single government, no matter what, every single government wants to have most of the powers in its own hands. The government may make certain bodies, but they will only make them recommendatory in nature, because the reason is, the moment you say that no, you don't recommend, you can take action straight away. The moment you do that, what will happen is that you are giving them too much power, and no government would want that. Then Pavitra, the current position of Kerala is that they are Lokayukt cannot dismiss a minister. They can only recommend dismissal of ministers, or they can recommend action to be taken to the state government, and the state government decides. Sakshi, I don't know if you were not listening. Some states, we discussed this. Some states have a practice of appointing a up Lokayukta as well. There are certain states that do that. Then Kawana saying I'm appealing for 25. Is it prelims or is it Kawana? This is a static part. Devani saying if no serious work is given to Lokayukta by the state, then what matter to have Lokayukta? Devani, I'm not saying no serious work is given. Understand? State government does not give a work to Lokayukta. Lokayukta is present so that the people can go and file a complaint. So it's about the people. If they want to file a complaint to Lokayuk, they can. If your question is the state has not given them enough powers, understand this, guys. Whenever you have this question in your mind that the government has not given them this power, why is the government not doing this? Why is the government not doing that? Understand this. The government will only do something when they think that it will impact their chances of winning the election. As simple as that. Next time, when you think, why has the government not given power to the Lokpal or the Lokayuk? Ask yourself, when there were elections and when people came to your house to ask for votes, did you ask them that why are you not giving power to Lokpal and Lokayuk? If as a voter you are not asking the politicians that why are you not giving power to Lokpal or Lokayuk, I will not vote for you otherwise, the politicians will not take any action. Why will the politicians by themselves create a body that is so powerful that it can take action against them? Why? They will only do that if people pressurize them. If you don't pressurize them, they will not do that. As simple as that. Then, Pari, in the absence of a chairman, there's an acting chairman of the Lokpal. One of the members becomes the acting chairman. Lakshmi, no. Lokpal and Lokayukta are not constitutional bodies, these are statutory bodies. Dhyana, I have repeated this time and time again. I'll repeat this once again. Some state governments have also appointed a position or made a new position called the Up Lokayukt or the Deputy Lokayukt. It is not important for us. Then Gunjan is saying, is question asked by UPS in interview about the state where we belong to? Yes, Gunjan, they do ask questions about the state where we belong to. My suggestion is don't think about the interview right now. Let's focus on prelims and mains for now. Sonia, no. Lokpal is not eligible for reappointment. Fatima is saying when a body does not come under ministry, then it is said to be an independent body. Fatima, not this is not the only criteria. There are other criteria as well. For example, not just this, apart from that, are they answerable? Can they be removed randomly or not? When you say independent body, that means you can work independently. You can't be removed randomly by the government whenever they want. The government does not control their functioning. For example, we call the Election Commission of India an independent body. It is not under any ministry. The government cannot randomly remove the election commissioners. Their salary, the charge expenditure, all of that is a parameter for being called an independent body. Chandan is saying, does a common man complain on Prime Minister with proper evidence? Chandan, yes, that is what we discussed yesterday. Go to Lokpal online portal, you can file a complaint against anyone you want. Okay, last question. Seema is saying, which bodies are known as executive bodies? So there are three types of bodies usually. Constitutional bodies are the ones which are established by the Constitution of India. There's an article number attached to it. Statutory bodies are the ones for which the Parliament of India has passed a law. Executive bodies are the ones which are just created by a government's order. No parliament law has been passed on it. It is not written in the constitution. Just because the government gave an order, the body was created. Those are called the executive bodies. Um, okay, I'll take one last question, then we'll go ahead. Chandra is saying, if a Lokpal bench contains 5 members without the Prime Minister, then it should contain minimum 50% members, which makes judiciary more control on executive. Chandan, I am not sure what you are trying to ask. If you can make your sentence in a better way so that it is grammatically correct, maybe I will be able to understand and answer that. But in your current form, I can't understand the statement. I can't understand what you're trying to ask. Anyway, so before we start, before we start this, the module number 4, let me ask you this question. How many of you gave the prelims examination this year? How many of you gave the prelims this year? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Most of you did. Okay. Most of you gave the prelims. How was it? How was it? Very bad. Oh, moderate. Very easy. Guys, don't tell me how the paper was as a third person. Tell me how your paper went. Don't say it was very easy, but for me it was difficult. Getting 76 GS wasn't good, GS wasn't good, easy, yeah. See, it was easier compared to last few years. There is no doubt about that. It was easier as compared to last few years. And one of the reasons, and there are a few reasons why it is seen as easier. One reason why it was seen as easier is the options that were given. Lesser number of questions, or much very few questions were about only one, only two, only three, some like that. So you could use the elimination technique also. But one other thing that has happened is in the past few years, the level of questions had increased drastically. Now the problem is when the UPSC increases the level of questions so drastically, the problem is it becomes a very random exam. Because if the UPSC randomly starts asking anything, then it is not a matter of what you studied, what you did not study. So in the last few years, it was more of a matter of luck. If you are very lucky, you will clear the prelims examination. But this year, the kind of paper that has been made, it is again advantage to those people who have studied properly. It was not about extremely tough questions, because see, the problem with when you make extremely tough paper is that you are discarding anyone who worked very hard in studying books and studying whatever has to be studied. When you give very tough questions, you make it a matter of luck. Randomly people will answer it, some people will get it right, randomly some people will not get it right. But when you have paper like the one that happened this year around, it brings back the confidence in the aspirant that okay, whatever we are reading is right. Because if you look at this year's paper, most of the questions, a majority of questions, could be answered easily if you had just read your standard books. Nothing out of the extraordinary, no special book had to be read. If you just read your normal books that are supposed to be read, the NCRTs, the Bipin Chandra, the M. Lakshmikant, Spectrum, all these normal books, amazing, whatever normal book that you study, it would have been good enough for you to answer. The paper becomes tough when the number of questions that you see, a majority of them cannot be answered from normal standard books. That becomes a difficult paper, and that difficult paper is problematic for everyone. But when there is a paper like the one that we had, it actually brings a lot of confidence back amongst the aspirants also, that okay, whatever I am studying is right. Now I'll tell you one more thing before we go ahead. How do you define whether a paper was tough or not tough? How do you say it was a tough paper? How do you say it was not a tough paper? How do you say this is simple? If you were able to answer everything that you had studied, please listen to this carefully. If you would have been able to answer everything that you have studied, then can you clear the exam? Yes or no? If yes, then it was an easy paper. If you forgot stuff, if in case, let's say, you were not able to answer because it confused you, if you were not able to answer because you were worried about something at that point of time, and that is why you could not clear, then it's not a difficult paper. It is a difficult paper if your normal knowledge is not enough. If you were able to go ahead and study everything, you were able to answer whatever you have studied at least once, then it is an easy paper. Now, no one knows the cutoff. The cutoff does not really come out till the final result is out. You will have the result in about a week or so. The results might come out. In the week or so, when the results will come out, you will just see the result and not the cutoff. What is the cutoff? That will be declared only once the entire cycle is over. I'll just suggest you one thing. If you have, and I'm sure you would have checked your answers from a lot of institutes' answer keys. We get answer keys from many institutes these days. Everyone checks those. You usually go ahead with those answer keys that are giving you the maximum marks. So please understand, whichever answer key you are checking, either given by Byju's or any other institute, please understand no answer key is 100% accurate. There will always be some errors in some answer keys. So even if there are two or three questions that your answer key that you have checked is telling you incorrect, but UPSC might take them as correct answers, it can make a lot of difference in your marks. So please do not trust any specific answer key 100% for now. Wait for the results. Till that time, continue with your preparation, assuming that you have cleared the prelims. Please just assume that you have cleared the prelims and continue with that, rather than thinking about when the result will come and I'll continue the preparation then only. Continue with the preparation. It's just a matter of a few more days. When the results come out, when the prelims result is out, only and only then you can go ahead and see what strategy to adopt after that. But for now, just assume that you have cleared the prelims examination. Continue with your preparation going ahead. Anyways, now we're starting module number 4. In module number 4, we are continuing with the theme of corruption. We will be studying about a few things in module number 4. We'll be starting our discussion with CBI, the Central Bureau of Investigation. Then we'll be studying about the CVC, Central Vigilance Commission. Then we'll study about an authority or a body that remains a lot in the news these days, the ED, Enforcement Directorate. And the fourth part that we'll be studying here is the Whistleblower Protection Act. These are the four things that we'll be studying in module number 4. Let's start with the first one, the Central Bureau of Investigation, or the CBI. Now, the CBI is the premier investigative agency for the central government. The idea is very simple. Police is a state subject. So, police comes under respective states. Let's say Kerala police reports to Kerala state government, Tamil Nadu police reports to Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh police reports to Andhra Pradesh government. So, in other words, central government does not have its own police to say. Every state have their own police. So, if the central government have to investigate a certain case, how do they do that? Central government have their own armed forces. Central government have their own armed police like the CRPF, etc. But they don't have an investigative agency of their own. And that is where the CBI comes in to fill in the gap. The Central Bureau of Investigation was set up by the British in 1941. It was first set up as Special Police Establishment, SPE, and in 1963 it became the CBI, Central Bureau of Investigation. It is a premier investigative agency for the government of India at the center government level. Now, how do you judge whether a certain agency is good or not? How do you judge the effectiveness of any agency? The one parameter that you have to judge any agency is its conviction rate. Conviction rate is a parameter that is used to judge any agency's success. What is the conviction rate? Conviction rate means, for example, let's say if there are 100 FIRs that are filed, out of these 100 FIRs, on how many the case has been proven? On how many of these the case has been proven? If out of the 100 FIRs, the case was proven on, let's say, 65, then the conviction rate is 65%. So conviction rate is out of the total number of FIRs that are filed, how many of these were finally proven in the court and they were punished. That is called the conviction rate. The higher the conviction rate, the better and the more advanced the agency is. For example, around the world, the American agency FBI is considered to be very, very good. Conviction rate of FBI is over 70%, and that's why it's considered to be so good. CBI also has an extremely, extremely good conviction rate. For example, the conviction rate of CBI that we have is right now over 65%, and it aims to reach 75% or higher. Now, understand this, in the past few years, we have been seeing a lot of criticism of how the CBI works. Criticism in the sense that if you look at CBI, many people call it a political body now. Why? Because it works on the instruction of the politicians. You will see, doesn't matter which government is in power, every government tries to misuse the CBI. For example, if the BJP is in power, you will never see CBI taking any action against BJP people. When the Congress is in power, you will never see the CBI taking up any case against people in the Congress. How the bodies or how these investigative agencies work depends a lot on who is in power. But despite all that criticism, the good part is that they have maintained their conviction rate of over 65%, which is a big, big, big deal. Now, the CBI mainly has these three divisions. These are three things that the CBI does. First, anti corruption division looks into anti corruption cases, scams, etc. Then they have an economic offenses division. When there are certain frauds, money is missing, then they take up this matter. And third is special crime. Special crime can be anything. It can be, let's say, murder, let's say, rail accidents, even terror cases. All of these come under special crime division. These are the different types of division. These are the different types of categories under which the CBI will work. Now, please understand, if you look at how CBI works, every single case requires a different type of expertise. For example, you cannot expect a CBI officer who can take up a case of murder as well, and the same officer should be asked to take up a case for fraud as well. These are all very, very different things. All these cases require different amount of expertise, and that is why the CBI has these different divisions, in the sense that they ensure that there are different types of expertise and different types of training that is given to people who are working in the CBI. Now, the important case is, which cases can they take up? That is, which cases can the CBI take up? First, see, there are three cases the CBI can take up, or rather, three types of cases. First type of case. CBI can take up cases suo moto, means by itself, if they take place in a union territory. CBI can take up a case by itself if they happen in a union territory. Means if there is a case or there is an issue that has taken place, let's say in Delhi, Chandigarh, Andaman Nicobar, Jammu Kashmir, Lakshadweep, if any case or any issue happens in a union territory, the CBI can take up the case by itself without anyone else's permission. Second, if they have to take up a case within a state, then the state government has to give permission. The state government has to give permission. For example, if let's say something wrong happened in West Bengal, then the West Bengal government has to give permission. Only then the CBI can take up the matter. For example, a few months back, we had this very bad train accident in Odisha, Balasore. Remember? Now, when we had this train accident in Odisha, the CBI took up the inquiry. But for the CBI to take up the inquiry, Odisha government had to give permission because the issue or the matter happened in Odisha. So if they are taking up a matter that happened in a specific state, then the state government must first give permission. Only then they will be allowed to take up the matter. Third way in which they can take up a case, the CBI can take up a case is if Supreme Court or High Court's order. If the Supreme Court and High Court's order, then they can take up any investigation without any permission required from the government. Without the permission of the government, they can take up any matter if the Supreme Court or the High Court has asked them. Again, please remember this, I'm repeating it. There are three types of cases, or there are three ways in which the cases can be taken up by the CBI. Number one, suo moto, means by itself. These are the cases that happen in union territories. Number two, if they have to take up a case that has happened within a state, then that state's government has to first give permission. Only if that state's government gives permission, only and only then the case can be taken up. And the third is if the Supreme Court or High Court, they order the investigation to be done by the CBI, then they will take up the investigation. For that, they do not require the government's permission. These are the three types of cases that the CBI takes up. Now, if you look at the second point here, the state cases where the state governments have to give permission, earlier there was no problem with that. Earlier means a few years back, state governments were able to give permission, they were ready to give permission. Why? Because the state governments thought that CBI will work independently, CBI will work for our interest, so they used to give permission. But now what has happened in the past few years, the relationship between the center and the state governments has deteriorated considerably. In the past few years, the deterioration in the center and the state government relation has become so much that we are now seeing the state governments are not able to trust the center government and vice versa. That is why in the past few years now, state governments in most cases do not give permission. State governments in most cases now do not give permission to the CBI to take up the investigation. That reflects on how exactly the relationship between the center and the state has changed. Because relationship between the center and the state is a matter of how the political climate is in the country, and that is why the working of the CBI also has changed. CBI is headed by the director. The director of the CBI is appointed by the president on recommendation of a three-member committee. These three members are Prime Minister, leader of the opposition of Lok Sabha, and the Chief Justice of India. These are the three people who make a committee, and this committee would then recommend to the President of India about who shall become the next CBI director. Now, CBI director is basically an IPS officer, one of the highest positions that the IPS officer can get to is a CBI director. This is how the CBI director usually works. Appointed by the president on the recommendation of this three-member committee, again the prime minister, leader of the operation of the Lok Sabha, and the chief justice of India. If you look at the working of the CBI, it has had a lot of issues. There's a lot of criticism of the CBI, some because of good reasons and some because of without any good reason. The first allegation that the CBI faces is excessive political interference, and that is true. Whenever the government changes at the center government level, whenever we have a new government, the one problem that you will see always is whenever a new government comes in, they will try and tell the CBI which cases to investigate and which cases not to investigate. Every government wants cases against their opponents only to be investigated, and they don't want any case to be investigated where they can be held guilty or their members can be held guilty. So there's a lot of political interference in how the CBI works. On paper, the CBI is independent. On paper, the government says CBI is independent, but the reality is that is not true. Actually, there's a lot of political interference in the working of the CBI. And you will see this. The CBI never prosecutes or never takes action against a member of the ruling party, against a minister of the ruling party. No action is ever taken by the CBI. In many cases, there's a long delay in investigations. Why? Because of again the same thing. The reason is when you have a change in the government, let's say the BJP government comes in, the first decision they will take is whatever cases were pending against, let's say, BJP people, BJP members, all of them should be stopped. Similarly, when the Congress government comes in, they will do the same thing. They will ask the CBI to stop investigating any case where a Congress member was being investigated. That leads to a lot of delay in investigation of the CBI. Because of this, there's lots of credibility. Common people now across the country believe that CBI is misused by the government, and that is true. So much so that the Supreme Court itself said a few years back that CBI is like a caged parrot. Because it is a statement given by the Supreme Court, you can use this statement even in the examination in the main answer writing. As per the Supreme Court, CBI is a caged parrot that only repeats the voice of its master. That was a complete statement given by the Supreme Court that CBI is like a caged parrot that only repeats the voice of its master. That has led to loss of credibility because the Supreme Court also openly criticized the CBI of only looking into what the government wants from them and not taking up any other action. There is loss of account, lack of accountability. Lack of accountability means if some action by the CBI is not up to the mark, if they are not able to investigate properly, they are not answerable, no action is taken against them. There is shortage of personnel as well. Now, how do people come into CBI? Let's try and understand that. How do people join the CBI? There are two ways in which you join the CBI. First way is you can give the SSC CGL exam. If you pass the SSC CGL exam, you can join the CBI as a sub inspector. Sub inspector position is filled up through the SSC CGL examination. That is the first way. At the higher level, however, at the higher level, how the positions are filled in, people working for the police, they basically kind of transfer or get transferred or come on deputation to the CBI. They transfer for some years, or they come for some years, for some time as a deputy for deputation, then they go back. So what happens is most of the people in the CBI come from this method. They are working for different state police and then they get transferred to the CBI. The problem is no state government wants to send their police officers away to CBI. Why? Because the states themselves have a lack of police officers. There is shortage not just in the CBI, there is shortage also in the police. And because there's a shortage in the police, no police of any state would want to give away its officers to the CBI. That is why there's a shortage of personnel as well, shortage of number of people working. They have limited powers in the sense that the government controls a lot of their working. There have been issues in the past that whenever the CBI does something the government does not like, the CBI director is removed, the CBI director is transferred. It is very, very, very common that CBI looks into, or it's very common that the government actually tries to control the working of the CBI. There is also restricted access in the sense, I'll just close my camera for 1 minute so that you can read what is written here. Okay, look at this. Without the prior approval of the central government, they cannot conduct any inquiry on officers of the joint secretary level or higher. Read this carefully. There are different levels of government officers. The IAS officers at the joint secretary level or higher than that. In case the CBI has to conduct an examination against them, or in case the CBI has to conduct an investigation against rank of joint secretary or higher, that can only be done in case the government gives prior approval. And again, I have told you this multiple times earlier, the government tries to safeguard its favorite officers. The government tries to make sure that action is not taken against their favorite officers. That also interferes in the working of the CBI. That also becomes extremely, extremely, extremely problematic. CBI CBI faces criticism by the court very, very, very commonly. When the court called the CBI a caged parrot, this was not the only time that the CBI was criticized by the court. Every few months, the Supreme Court talks about the CBI and usually they try to criticize the CBI. In 2022, the Supreme Court Chief Justice talked about the falling credibility of the CBI. All of this is extremely, extremely common, that they talk about how the CBI has not been able to work properly, has not been able to ensure that they do their job properly. Now, with respect to the CBI, there's a very important case that you should know about. It is called the Vineet Narayan case of 1997. Have you heard of something called Hawala? Have you heard of Hawala transactions? Okay. Most people have, some people have not. Okay. Those who do not know this, in simple terms, Hawala transaction is, let's assume you have a lot of cash in India, black money. You don't have it in your bank account. You have it in your house. You have thousands of crores of rupees. You want to take that money to some other country. Let's say you want to take that money to Australia or to Dubai or to the US to buy some property there. Now you cannot transfer that money online because it is not in your bank account. That money is in cash with you, so you can't do that. Secondly, you can't really take that in a bag with you because you'll be caught at the airport. You can't take that amount of cash. So what do? This is where people called Hawala agents come into the picture. Now, who are Hawala agents or what are Hawala agents? What do they do? The job of the Hawala agent is that they will, for example, make sure that your money is transferred to wherever you want. They will take a commission, obviously, but they will get your money transferred to whoever they want in Australia, US, whatever. How they do that, I don't know. If I knew this, I would have become an Hawala agent and earned much more money than what I'm earning right now. So don't ask me how they do it, but that is what Hawala transactions are. So basically, what happened was in 1990s, there was a big Hawala scam that came out in India. There were some big industrialists that were involved in this case. Many big industrialists and their name had come out that they are involved in Hawala transactions. And when the investigation started by the CBI, it was alleged that many big politicians' names had come out. In fact, from every big political party of that time, from every big political party, there were names of certain politicians that had come out. So, what happened was, because of a lot of political pressure, the CBI did not investigate the case properly. There was so much pressure all around because, again, there were politicians involved from almost all the political parties. At that time, what happened was, there was a journalist. He's still alive, by the way. There's a journalist called Vineet Narayan. He ran a newspaper. The name of his newspaper was called Kal Chakra. He ran a newspaper called the Kal Chakra. So when CBI did not investigate the case properly, he was the one who decided that I will hold the investigation or I will have the investigation myself. So he basically took up the matter, he started investigating the case, and he was the one who went to the court as well, saying that the CBI is not doing their job properly. That became the famous Vineet Narayan case of 1997. In the Vineet Narayan case, the Supreme Court got extremely angry over the working of the CBI. And the Supreme Court told how the CBI should actually work, and they made some changes in the working of the CBI. For example, in the Vineet Narayan case, number one, Supreme Court said CBI should be supervised by CVC. Later in the class today, we will read what is CVC. CVC is Central Vigilance Commission. It is a statutory body. So, number one, the Supreme Court said that the government should not interfere and the CVC rather should look into the working of the CBI. Number one. Second, the government should not interfere in day to day administration of the CBI. And more importantly, the director of the CBI should not be randomly appointed or randomly transferred. Just a few minutes back, if you remember, we discussed how the CBI director is appointed. We discussed CBI director is appointed by the President of India on the recommendation of a three-member committee. This three-member committee and this process of appointing the CBI director was given by the Supreme Court in the Vineet Narayan case of 1997. Before the Vineet Narayan case of 1997 had come up, before this, the government randomly suggested whichever name that they wanted to the President of India. Before 1997, there was no such selection committee that had to be formed. There was no three-member committee that had to be formed. Before the Vineet Narayan case, the government just used to give any name to the President of India, and that is how they were appointed. But the Supreme Court said that no, this will not be done. You have to make a three-member committee, and this is how the CBI director is appointed even today. One other important change that happened was, earlier the government used to randomly transfer CBI directors. Whenever the government thought that the CBI director is not listening to them, whenever the government thought that the CBI director is uh, not taking up the case that the government wants, the government used to randomly transfer CBI directors after every few months. But the Supreme Court said that that cannot happen. You need to give a minimum 2 years of tenure to CBI director. A minimum guaranteed tenure should be given of at least 2 years so that they can work properly. Bhuvnesh, there is no maximum tenure here. So a minimum tenure of 2 years is to be given as per the Supreme Court, and there should be a selection committee of these three people who will suggest to the President of India who shall become the next CBI director. All these changes were made in the Vineet Narayan case. As you can see, this is Vineet Narayan, who became very famous with the investigation of the Hawala scandal. He is still alive. He, in fact, even today writes some editorials, especially in the Indian Express newspaper. If you read Indian Express regularly, you might find his editorials as well in the Indian Express newspaper. That is Vineet Narayan for you. Now, about the CBI, one other important thing that you have to understand is the concept of general consent. Now, what exactly do you mean by this? Consent means permission. A few minutes back, when we discussed how the CBI can take up cases, we discussed about three types of cases, or three ways rather, in which the CBI takes up the cases. The first way was when we have any issue in the union territory. If any issue happens or any crime happens in the union territory, the CBI can take up the matter suo moto, number one. Second, we have seen where a crime happens in a state, the state government first have to give permission. Only when the state government gives permission, that is the only time that the CBI can take up the inquiry. And then the third one was if the Supreme Court or the High Courts, they ask the CBI to take up the inquiry, only and only then they can take up this inquiry. Now, the second point where the state government has to give permission, that is where there is a lot of controversy attached. This is where there is a concept of general consent. Now, please understand this. There are two types of consent: general consent and specific consent. General consent means that the state has given a lifelong permission that the CBI can come and take up any case in my state. When a state has given general consent, what it means is that the state government says that you can come to my state and you can take up whichever investigation that you want, you can take up whatever case that you want. I don't mind. On the other hand, specific consent means that on every single case, on a case by case basis, CBI will or won't be given permission by the state government. Will or won't be given permission by state government. General consent means you have a general permission, you have a lifelong permission, you can come and you can basically take up whatever case that you want. In most of the cases, in most of the states, most states had given general consent to the CBI. Most of the states had told that you can come and take up the matter. However, in the past few years, what has happened is, in the past few years, since the relationship between the center and the state has become so bad, many state governments think that the CBI is interfering in their own investigation. In the past few years, many states have taken back the general consent. In case many states have taken back the general consent in the past few years. For example, Maharashtra, Rajasthan, West Bengal, Punjab, Chhattisgarh, all these states have taken back general consent. When we say taken back general consent, what do we mean? What we mean to say is that from now onwards, whenever there is an issue in the state, The states first have to give permission to the CBI. Only when the permission is given can the CBI come to investigate the matter. If the permission is not given, if the consent is not given by the state government, then the CBI cannot come and take up the investigation. That is the current status now. Only and only if general consent is given, only and only if the states allow general consent, then they can come up. If the general consent is taken away, then what happens? Then on every single case, every single time a case comes in, CBI has to take special permission from the state. If the state allows them, great. If the state does not allow them, then it is not allowed for the CBI. This issue of general versus the consent or versus specific consent, you can understand this in some other way. I'll give you one more example. When we used to be in school, and let's say a teacher was teaching, and someone in the middle of the class used to go to the teacher and say, "Ma'am, may I go to drink water?" So the teacher used to say, "Okay, you go and drink water." So you go out, you drink water. When you come back, you stand at the gate of the class and then you ask, "Ma'am, may I come in?" Now, what happened in our class was, when so many people used to come and then ask the teacher, "Ma'am, may I come in?" Our teacher got very frustrated. Our teacher made a rule that when you are coming back in the class, don't ask me, just come inside and sit. Meaning that our teacher had given the students general consent. Our teacher had told the student that you have my general consent, that whenever you come back, don't worry, just come, enter the class, and then sit in the class. You don't have to ask me. This is called general consent. Specific consent would mean every single time you come to the class, to enter the class, you ask for permission. If permission is given, then you enter the class. If it is not given, you don't enter the class. As simple as that. The same is the case here with the CBI as well. Whether the CBI is given the permission or not, depending upon that, the CBI can take up the investigation. If the CBI is not given the permission, then they cannot take up the investigation in that state. If on the other hand, if on the other hand consent is given, only then they can take up the investigation. That was the CBI. One more authority that we have in India, again to fight against corruption, is called the CVC. It is called the CVC, Central Vigilance Commission. Vigilance basically means keeping an eye. We have something called the Central Vigilance Commission. What exactly is this? See, in simple terms, the Central Vigilance Commission idea is, whenever, let's say, you go to a government office, okay? Now, in the government office, let's assume someone is asking for a bribe. Now, what do you do if someone is asking for a bribe? This is where you can file a complaint to the Central Vigilance Commission. Central Vigilance Commission, what will they do? Whenever they have a complaint to them, they will contact that department. Let's say you filed a complaint that I am not getting my driving license made. Whenever I try and get a driving license made, everyone is asking for a bribe. Let's say you file that complaint. So what happened in this case is, Central Vigilance Commission will look into the working of the RTO wherever the complaint has been filed. They will try to investigate the matter themselves. If they can't investigate themselves, if the matter is too complex, they will ask the CBI to help them out. And then they will recommend action to the government against that officer. That is the job of the CVC, the Central Vigilance Commission. It was set up in 1962 or 1964 rather. It is a very, very old body. In 1962, a committee was formed called the Santhanam Committee. In 1962, a committee was formed called the Santhanam Committee. This Santhanam Committee had recommended setting up the CVC, Central Vigilance Commission. In 1964, it was set up. It was first set up as an executive body. I told you difference earlier as well. I'll repeat this once again for those who don't know. Executive body basically means just a body set up by the government's order. Means no act of the parliament has been passed for this. It has not been mentioned in the constitution. It is just formed because the government gave an order. Because the government launched an order, that is how this body was created. This is called an executive body. So it was formed as an executive body first in 1964. In 2003, to make it slightly more powerful, to make it more stable, the government passed a law on it and government converted it into a statutory body. So right now the present status is that it is a statutory body. But it was not always the case. As I told you, do remember, it first started as an executive body. It later on became a statutory body. It is a statutory body even today. How do they work? How many are there? How many members are there? CVC has three people in total. One, the Central Vigilance Commissioner that sits at the top, and then there are two vigilance commissioners, just like in other bodies as well. Just like we have in other bodies, in this body also we have vacant positions. Just like in case of other bodies, in this body also we have vacant positions. Again, the logic is the same. When you ask why is it that the government is keeping these positions vacant, why is it that the government of India is not appointing them, the answer is the same. Why is it that the government will appoint them? Because again, if the common people are not putting pressure on the government, if common people don't demand from the government during the election season that I will only vote for you if you appoint judges, I will only vote for you if you fill in the vacant positions in the Lokpal, if you don't ask these questions to the government, why is it that the government will appoint anyone? Because it is not a topmost priority for you. It will not be topmost priority of the government, as simple as that. In a democracy, the government will only take those steps or those actions that will help them win the election, as simple as that. If the government takes a certain step, they first calculate whether it will help us in winning the election or not. If it will not help us in winning the election, then they will not take that step, as simple as that. So, appointing these officers also is not a topmost priority of the government, because why would the government do that? It is not really something that impacts them. Who are these people who can become these vigilance commissioners? Those who are or those who have been in All India service or any other central civil service, those who have experience in matters of vigilance, policy making, administration, police administration, etc. Or apart from that, if you are someone who has held office in a government company, in a government organization that was formed by the central government, etc., if you have experience in finance, banking, etc. In short, these are bureaucrats. These are bureaucrats only who are appointed by the government. Either these are IAS officers or other bureaucrats. These are the people who are appointed here who can work as the vigilance commissioners. This is the responsibility that has been given to them. Appointment is again done by the President of India on the recommendation of a three-member committee. These three members are the Prime Minister, who works as the chairperson, Home Minister, who is the second member, and the third member is the leader of the opposition. These are the three people who will form a committee, and in this committee, they will look into or they will recommend to the President of India who shall be the next CVC or who shall be the next Vigilance Commissioner. Only on those basis would there be appointment done by the President of India. That is how it usually happens. These are the other conditions. Basically, the tenure is 4 years and the retirement age is 65 years of the vigilance commissioners. The removal process, I have told this multiple times earlier as well. The removal process is the same as the UPSC members. We have discussed this earlier as well. Just like the UPSC members are removed, how? The President of India can ask the Supreme Court to conduct an inquiry. The Supreme Court will see if you have any paid employment outside the office. The Supreme Court will see if you are guilty of any moral crime, if you're guilty of corruption. In those cases, the Supreme Court will ask the president to remove you, and that is how you can be removed. That is similar to how the CVC members will be removed as well. This is again, as I said, the same process that is repeated for a lot of these bodies. I'll repeat this once again for UPSC members, CVC, CIC, Lokpal, National Human Rights Commission. For all of them, exactly the same process has to be repeated, and that is how they will be removed. These are the functioning of the CVC. The biggest function that they have is they look into the working of the CBI whenever any corruption related cases are being investigated by the CBI. As we discussed earlier, the CBI can investigate different types of cases, but only and only when there are cases of corruption. When there are corruption related cases that are taken up by the CBI, the CVC will look into this. The CVC will see whether they are being worked into properly by the CBI or not. They will review the progress made by the CBI. Also, whenever any complaint or whenever any permission by the CBI is asked from the government, as you remember, just a few minutes back we discussed, if the CBI has to investigate a joint secretary or higher level officer, then the central government first have to give permission. Without the central government's permission, the CBI cannot investigate a joint secretary or a higher level officer. When such permissions are asked from the central government, there might be a delay in giving the permission. The CVC will look into the status of that delay. Whatever permissions are asked from the central government, the CVC will look into it. The CVC will now see whether or not the permissions are given or not. These are some of the functions that the CVC usually performs. Who are the people against whom the CVC can take up these investigations? Members of all India services, apart from the ones who are working for the union government, Group A officers, all other officers of the central government, PSU, the central sector private undertakings, all the people working for the government offices, all of them are under the investigation, the jurisdiction of the CVC. Now, you might think that CVC and Lokpal seem very similar, right? Both of them look very similar. For Lokpal also, you could go and register a complaint if you had a corruption related case. For CVC also, we are saying the same thing, that if you have a complaint against any corruption cases, you can file a complaint to the CVC. They seem like they are the same, but in reality, there is some specific differences. First big difference, Lokpal can also investigate ministers, prime minister, and members of parliament. This is something that the Lokpal can do and not the CVC. Please remember, the CVC cannot investigate ministers, prime minister, or the members of the parliament. CVC is only for public servants or basically the government servants, the government employees. Second, CVC has to look into the working of CBI. And the third big difference is CVC basically has bureaucrats only, while Lokpal has judges also and bureaucrats. Majority of them are judges, majority of them are judicial members. And that is why, again, there are differences between the CVC and the Lokpal. Before I go ahead, give me a moment. Let me just fill up my water bottle. Just give me a couple of minutes. Don't go anywhere. I'll be back here. Okay. Now, as I said yesterday also, the one good thing that the government has done and the governments have done in the past few years is that they have made most of the processes online, and it has become much easier to contact the government, to file complaints, register your issues. We saw this with the RTI, we saw this with the Lokpal also, and now with the CVC also. You see this, that filing a complaint to the CVC if you have a corruption related issue has become much easier. It is all online. You can see this portal. This is a portal where you can file a complaint if you want to file a complaint to CVC. All is done online. You can also track the status of your complaint, and the CVC will take action. Now, something very interesting can be seen here, which was not seen yesterday in the Lokpal website. Look at this. Your identity shall be kept confidential. Now, what exactly do you mean by this? Your identity should be kept confidential. Basically, this was not something that we saw in case of the Lokpal, which means if you file a complaint to the CVC, your name, your identity will not be disclosed to anyone. No one will know who you are, no one will know who filed this complaint. Because what happens is, when you file a complaint against powerful people who are at topmost positions, there is always a chance that you might get some issues with it and you might get into trouble. This is where the law comes into the picture, and we'll read about that in just a bit. In India, we have something called the Whistleblower Protection Act. Under the Whistleblower Protection Act, whatever complaint you file will not be disclosed, or your name, identity will not be disclosed, so that no action can be taken. Tell me this: uh, have you read about or have you heard about something called the Vyapam scam? Have you heard of something called the Vyapam scam? Any idea? Okay. Okay, most people don't know this. Okay, so basically, what Vyapam is a government examination conducted in Madhya Pradesh. So in MP Madhya Pradesh, there's an entrance exam conducted. It's basically a professional examination board. Vyapam stands for Vyavsaik Pariksha Mandal. So basically, it conducts examinations for a lot of things in the state government, for admissions into government jobs, for admission into government institutions as well. So what happened was, a few years back, there was this huge scam that broke out, that someone else was giving the exam on someone else's admit card. There was large scale cheating that happened. Now, this is not something new, right? Basically, the idea is that if you see Vyapam scam coming out, that does not, it is not something that has happened for the first time. NTA, the NEET examination, paper leak, these are not the new things. But what was different in Vyapam scam was, just like in the movies, whoever came out in the open to complain, whoever said that I will tell you who are the people involved, many people were mysteriously killed. Just like in movies, some people all of a sudden were killed in their sleep. On some people, they were killed by a truck. Some people had a very weird accident. Everyone who was a witness in the case, everyone who tried to become a witness in the case was all killed. There were many killings that happened, and still date there has not been anything that has been resolved so far. There have been so many killings that have happened because of this, and again, no case has been resolved so far. There have been killings, for example, people have gone missing. There have been people whose entire name has been changed. People have been killed overnight by truck and by car accidents. This is the Vyapam scam. Now, with these scams again, the need for Whistleblower Protection Act becomes even more serious, and that is the case here as well. Now, in the working of the CVC itself, there are some issues. First, they are dependent on the CBI to conduct an inquiry. Now, understand something. we have a lot of bodies in India to register complaints. We have the CVC, we have the Lokpal, we have these commissions like the National Human Rights Commission, so on and so forth. But none of these are investigative agencies. Please understand. You can file a complaint to Lokpal, you can file a complaint to CVC, you can file a complaint to Human Rights Commission anywhere, but all of them eventually will have to go to CBI only to ask for investigation, because none of these authorities will investigate the case themselves. They don't have the power, they don't have the authority, they don't have the skills to investigate the case. All of them are dependent on the CBI only to conduct the inquiry. So what happens is there is so much pressure and job, or there is so much workload on the CBI to conduct so many inquiries that it becomes a big problem. Agencies such as the Lokpal, CVC, all of them are dependent on the CBI only to conduct such inquiries. The other problem, they don't have independent powers of prosecution, meaning that if they find someone guilty, if they find that yes, someone has conducted a crime or committed a crime, committed an offense, they can just ask the government of India, or they can recommend action to the government of India rather. This recommendation is not binding on the government. Their final decision ultimately has to be taken by the government of India only. Whether the government wants to take action against the officer or not, whether the government is actually going ahead and protecting the officer, that depends on the government. But the power to take action against the minister or against any official does not lie with the CVC. CVC can only recommend the action to be taken. Then there are delays from the side of the government also. When the government wants to protect their officers, they will try and make sure that the officers do not face any sanctions. The government will delay the permission, and that is why we see all these problems in the working of the CVC, and thus CVC has not been able to be as effective as it should be. Apart from that, government does not accept the recommendations for disciplinary actions, especially when these recommendations are against officers that the government likes. There is poor engagement with the civil society, meaning that there is lack of awareness. Just think about this. How many common people do you think in India know that something like the CVC exists? Very few. If you would have not entered the field of UPSC examination, many of you also would never have known that something like CVC exists. That is a big problem. The government does not make any attempts to make people more aware about these things. The government does not make any attempt to make sure that people are aware that something like this exists. There is lack of awareness, there is lack of engagement with the civil society. So people don't know how to actually engage with that. People don't even know how to take any steps so that it can be helpful for them going forward. That is also a big problem with the CVC. Other issues, as we discussed, vacant positions. Out of the three places, only one place is filled. We only have chief vigilance commissioner, and the are vacant, and that is again why we have not seen these issues being resolved. We have still seen CVC not being able to work up to its level, not being able to resolve the cases because the government itself is not appointing them. And again, don't ask me why is the government not appointing these officers. You know the answer. Until you or common people put pressure on the government, why would the government appoint anyone in these positions? Before we move on to the next authority, ED, let me give you a few minutes. If you want to ask any doubts, quickly do that. We'll then take a break and then we'll start with this. Rohit is saying, are the things ever going to change on the basis of institutions being corrupt? Rohit, let's not assume institutions being corrupt, and let's not depend only on the government for changes. The simple idea again is only when common people pressurize the government that I want certain thing to be changed, only then the things will change, otherwise they will not. As simple as that. So responsibility is with the people and not with the government. Kagan is saying CBI, one of the problem is influence of the government. Why do we have CBI, CVC dependent on CBI for investigation? Because Gagan, they don't have their own investigative arm. Investigation is not something that a common man can do. Investigation requires a skill. You get trained for that for many years. CBI officers are trained for that. People who work in CVC or Lokpal are who? They're civil servants. They're not trained in investigation. You can't investigate a case just by watching a movie. CBI does it. It's a specialist job. Uh, they were saying problem in the CVC 1 point repeat. They were the first point was that whatever complaint you file with the CVC, they will have to ask the CBI only to conduct the inquiry. That is why they depend on the CBI. Fatima, the exact work of CVC is that you can register a complaint to CVC if you are facing corruption in the government offices. Guys, please wait. Don't confuse CVC with CBI. These are two different things. CBI is the investigative agency, they investigate cases. You can't go to CBI to register a complaint, can you? There is no way for you to go to CBI to register a complaint. You can't go there. You can go to police, you can go to CVC. CVC will ask the CBI to conduct the inquiry. CBI is not in touch with common people. CBI is the investigative agency. CVC is where you can go and file a complaint. That is the difference between the two. Jayashree is saying, how can CVC have independent powers of prosecution without judicial interference? No, Jayashree, when we say independent powers of prosecution, what we mean to say is when they have investigated a case and they find out that a person is guilty, then they should be allowed to take action against that officer. For example, charging that officer, dismissing that officer. Right now, they can only recommend it. If your question is, then what does the judiciary do? The point is, if you are saying that judiciary is the only thing that does it, understand, judiciary at the end of the day will take up these cases if the case goes to them. If, for example, CVC takes an action against an officer, that officer can always go to judiciary. It's not that actions taken or decisions taken by the CVC will always be final. If the officer has a problem, they can always go to the judiciary and try and get that case re-evaluated once again. Priyanshu thinks, why CBI is scared of central government? Priyanshu, everyone is scared of people who employ you. Wherever your salary comes from, you will always be scared of your boss. Uh, Devyani is saying, sorry, Shilpa is saying there is various platform to curb corruption. Still, we have not achieved transparency in governance. Shilpa, yes, because the people, common people, are not serious about it. Full stop. Devyani is saying how to pressurize government to do any appointment or work. Devyani, next time when the elections happen, you should tell the government, I will not vote for you if you do not appoint these people. Then the government will do that. Simple. Priyanka, the tenure of CBI director was not fixed before 1997 case. The government randomly used to appoint directors and randomly removed them whenever they wanted. Madhura is saying CVC doesn't have power to investigate. What is the importance if they can't investigate or make their own results? No, Madhur. It's not that CVC don't have power to investigate. They don't have staff to investigate. Again, guys, understand. Investigation is a special task. You get trained for that. You watch some movies and you think you can also investigate a case. That does not happen. The CBI is a specialist agency that takes up those investigations. What does the CVC do? They register the complaints, they hold preliminary inquiries. They can contact that office, they can contact that department against whom complaint has been filed. They'll try and have a preliminary inquiry. If they think this is not enough, then they'll ask the CBI to come up and investigate the case. Rohit is saying there is not even a single agency which is not having any loophole which is leading to corruption. Rohit, that is how the world works. No one is without any loopholes. Everyone has loopholes. Then Fatima is saying, can a state ask the CBI to investigate? Can CBI deny to investigate? Fatima, the state can ask the CBI to investigate. The CBI, again, on paper, they can deny, but they never do. On paper, they can deny. On paper, they can't deny if the central government is asking them or the courts are asking them. If the state is asking them, they can deny, but they don't. Usually, they don't. No Gunjan, there is no fixed tenure for CBI officers. They have a retirement age like the bureaucrats. Pari, I told you specific consent means when the state government says that I'm not giving you general consent, whenever any case comes up, for every single case, you have to come and ask me for my permission. That is called specific consent. Specific consent simply means that I am not giving you my full overall permission. Whenever a new case comes in every new case, you have to come and ask for my permission specifically. Rashida, CBI work on to central government. See, current government, Rashida, in every guys understand this. Whenever you blame any agency or any government, please understand every government works in the same manner. Just because people have a short term memory, we think it is only the current government that is doing it. Every government in power behaves the same way. Whenever any party comes to power, they behave the same way. They misuse the ED, they misuse the CBI, they misuse the agencies. That is the nature of power. For example, the ED, Enforcement Directorate, and we'll study about this after the break. The ED, the Enforcement Directorate that we talk about, when we say that BJP or the government is misusing it. But the reality is, ED is an agency that was formed when the Congress was in power. It was the Congress government that actually formed this agency. Then the next government started to use it. So basically, every single government or whichever party is running that government, whichever party is in power, all of them behave the same manner. Do not distinguish between that. Just because we think that the current government is working in a certain manner, that does not really mean that the last government was different. People just have a short term memory. People think, oh, this government is doing this, the last government was the same. Every party, when they are in the opposition, they behave in a very different manner. They demand very different things. And when they come to power, they will behave in a very different manner. And that happens with everyone. It's not new. Misuse of agencies, lack of transparency that everyone is saying, it is a reality. And when you are saying how to change it, and I'm repeating it time and time and time again, expecting the government to change everything will not happen because there is no incentive for the government to change it. Please understand this. Understand. I'll give you a very simple example. Okay, let's take a very simple example. Let's assume that I come to the class every day and I don't teach. Okay, I'm just sitting here, sleeping, switching off my camera, and if I still get paid my salary at the end of the month, do you think I will have any incentive to wake up at 5 in the morning, get into a shower, get ready, come and sit in the class? If I'm getting my salary anyways, would you think anyone will come? No. You might have some people who are coming because they're goodwill, but every single day, if you're working, if you're compromising, because there is something at stake. If I get my salary anyways, if everything is fine, why would anyone put the extra work? Same is the case with the government. If there is a government, there's a party that is winning the elections anyway, right? Why would they make any change in that? As simple as that. At the end of the day, if they are winning the elections without doing all these things, why would they go ahead and do all these things, go and do all that extra job and increase their own work? That is a simple idea. On that note, let's take a break. Uh, okay, be back at 8:20 and we'll resume from here. We'll start with the ED. Hi everyone. All right then. The next thing that we will study today is ED, Enforcement Directorate. It's an agency that comes a lot in the news, often criticized by the opposition parties. They say that the government is misusing it. We see it in the news, getting on and conducting raids against many politicians, many well known people. That is what we'll be discussing today. Now, what exactly is ED? How does it start? So, Enforcement Directorate, in simple terms, it's an agency that works under PMLA. There's an agency that works under PMLA. PMLA is Prevention of Money Laundering Act. Let's first try to understand what is money laundering. As you say the word laundry, laundry means to clean your clothes. Similarly, when you clean money, that is called money laundering. So when you are trying to convert black money or unaccounted money into legal money, that is called money laundering. So if you have some money, for example, on which you did not pay taxes, you have not disclosed the source of that money, that is called black money. When you convert that and try to legalize that, that becomes money laundering. And to stop that, we have a law in India called the PMLA, Prevention of Money Laundering Act. For that, there is a body called the ED. So, first thing that many people have confusion in their minds about is why do we need the ED? We have the CBI, but these two are very, very, very different. ED is specifically for money laundering related offenses, and the CBI is for many other offenses. They look into scams, they look into, let's say, corruption related cases, they look into train accidents, murders, all these kind of cases are taken up by the CBI. ED, on the other hand, is specifically for the money laundering cases. Now, before ED, also, we had something called the Enforcement Unit. The Enforcement Unit, it was formed in 1956, but it did not have as much powers as the ED has today. Today's ED Enforcement Directorate has a lot more powers as compared to what used to be earlier. All of this is under a law called the PMLA Act of 2002. PMLA again stands for Prevention of Money Laundering Act. In 2002, this law was passed. Under this, the ED got all its powers. ED, in fact, has the power to investigate. They have the power to confiscate your properties as well. They, in fact, even have the power to look into the case if you have saved black money outside India. So even if there's black money that is saved outside India, they can still go ahead and try and take up that case as well. That is where ED becomes extremely, extremely powerful. And we have seen how people are getting arrested by the ED. People are getting, for example, let's say Delhi Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal. Arvind Kejriwal is in the jail still because of a case by the ED. There are so many other politicians across the entire country that have been put into jail or that have been investigated by the ED. Now, the question is, when does ED come into the picture? There has to be a certain limit to it, right? ED will only come into the picture when there is at least 1 crore rupees that is involved. If there is 1 crore rupees or more that is involved, only and only then the ED will come into the picture. Now, let me give you an example of how this actually works. So, let's assume that some people rob a bank. They take out all the cash from the bank. Now, if they take out, let's say, 5 crore rupees of cash from the bank, that will not involve the ED, because, again, a case of simple theft, if a theft has happened, a bank robbery has happened, this is not a ED case, this is a police case. This is a police case. But when that money is now being misused, it is now being converted to legal money, that is when the ED comes into the picture. So ED does not come in the picture when there is a theft. Please do understand that. ED will only and only come in the picture when that illegal money or that money that you have gotten illegally is now being converted to legal money. That is when the ED comes in. When the police, for example, comes to know about such a case, that over 1 crore rupees are being laundered, they will tell ED about it. ED will come into the picture. They are the ones who work under central government specifically to look into money laundering. And the reason is money laundering is taken extremely seriously, not just in India, but around the entire world. The reason being that laundered money or black money is seen as a big source of terror activities or terror funding. How do terrorists get their money? From where do they get their hands on to buy these weapons, to get training, to have a place to live? All of that is somewhere related to money laundering and black money. That is why nations around the world, specifically India, are extremely serious about tackling this threat of money laundering. As I told you, the difference between the local police and the ED, the local police, they will take up the case of theft. But when that money is being used now, that black money is now being converted to some other form. Let's say you're buying a property with that money that you had stolen. Let's say you are trying to buy a jewelry with that money that is being stolen. That becomes money laundering, and that is when the ED comes into the picture. And again, remember, ED will only come in the picture if the amount of money that is involved is at least 1 crore rupees. So, number one, it has to be laundering of the money, not just theft, and it has to be laundering of money above 1 crore rupees and not below that. Only then the ED will get involved. The bank example that I gave you is written here for your understanding. What exactly is the role of the ED? What do they do? As I said, they can search the premises. We have seen ED taking up so many searches, taking up investigations, going into the premises, having raids in the homes of the officers. They can carry out search without calling the person for questioning as well. When the person gets arrested, ED will get 60 days to file the complaint or the charge sheet. So basically, they can take up 60 days of time to then prepare their charge sheet. And the punishment under PMLA, the maximum punishment that one can get is 7 years. Now, this is also a very interesting part. Please do remember this. Under the PMLA law, the maximum punishment that you can get is 7 years and not more than that. Now, this is interesting, and I'll tell you why is this interesting. In the past, the Supreme Court had said that money laundering is equal to terrorism. Please understand this. In the past, Supreme Court had said that money laundering is equal to terrorism, but this cannot be justified. How? Terrorism is a charge where if you are found guilty in terrorism, you can be sentenced to death. On the other hand, in case of money laundering, even if you are found guilty, the maximum punishment that you will get is only 7 years. So, how can you equate 7 years of punishment or any crime that can only give you 7 years of punishment? How can you equate that with a crime that can give you a death sentence? That is again something which is controversial. That is, it is good to say, or you can say that money laundering is as bad as terrorism, as the Supreme Court said, but in reality, you can't compare the two. That is a bit problematic, and this is why getting bail under PMLA is extremely difficult. We have seen so many politicians who actually go and who are filed under, or who are basically jailed under the PMLA law. It's very difficult for them to get a bail. The reason is, again, the Supreme Court has said that money laundering is as bad as terrorism. So we will not be willing to give them any bail. What about retrospective cases, in the sense that what are the cases that the ED can take up? ED can take up only those cases that came up in 2005 and not before that. Why? The PMLA law, under which ED gets all its powers, the law was only enforced in 2005. So if there was any money laundering before 2005, that case will not be taken up by the ED. I'll repeat once again. Please understand this. Since the ED gets its powers from PMLA law and the PMLA only came up in 2005, the only cases that the ED can take up are the cases where money laundering happened after 2005. If any money laundering took place before 2005, the ED cannot take up that case. Please do remember that. The ED cannot take up the case that is before 2005. Even if, let's say, the money was stolen before 2005, but the money was misused after 2005, then they can take up the case. When the money laundering happens, when the money is being converted from black to white, that is what matters. If it happens before 2005, they cannot. After 2005, they can take up the case. ED, as I said, has been given a lot of powers. Not just the person who is laundering the money, anyone who is helping them launder the money, anyone who is trying to hide this money, anyone who is actually helping that person buy any property from that money, all the people connected with this activity can be charged with by the ED. So ED will look into all these things. It will not just look into what are the cases that actually, or it will not just look into the people who are doing this. It will also look into people who are attached to this in any way. Now, the one big criticism of the ED that we have, which is true, is that it is being used to target opposition politicians. Talk to any of the opposition members, all of them will say the same thing. All of the opposition members will say that ED is being misused to target them. Now, this is not entirely false. Why? Because if you see the people who have been given notices by the ED, if you see the people on whom the cases are dropped by the ED, that is very clear. Anyone who joins the ruling party, on them the cases are dropped. Anyone who leaves the ruling party, goes to some other party, cases are opened up against them. The same people who were criticized earlier for money laundering, for corruption, the same people, when they join the ruling party, the cases are dropped against them, and that is again an open secret. It's nothing that is new. All these things make ED, or bring down the name of the ED considerably. The Supreme Court has said that the PMLA is being misused. However, they still support the powers given to the ED, because, as I said earlier, the Supreme Court has equated terrorism with money laundering. Many people don't agree to this, but Supreme Court says terrorism is as bad as money laundering. And that is why the Supreme Court, despite multiple petitions, has refused to cut down on the powers of the ED. There have been many cases filed in the Supreme Court saying that the powers of the ED should be cut down. ED should not be that powerful, but that has not happened. The powers of the ED have remained intact. The Supreme Court has not cut down on the powers, saying that money laundering has to be tackled. Now, this is something which has to be understood. See, remember we saw the conviction rate of CBI. Conviction rate of CBI was over 65%. Remember? Now, same is the case here. If you actually look at, for example, how does the ED work, or the conviction rate of the ED? Just like the police files an FIR, just like the police files an FIR, ED files something called ECIR. ECIR is Enforcement Case Information Report. ECIR is Enforcement Case Information Report, ECIR. So just like the police files the FIR, the ED files ECIR. If you look at this, how many people have been convicted, means on how many people the case has been proven. See this. 943 complaints were filed. Out of 943 complaints, only 23 people were convicted. Only 23. If you see, this is a lump sum conviction rate of 2%. Just 2% conviction rate. Can you imagine? Only 2% conviction rate. Means out of 100 people on whom a case is filed by the ED, only on two people the case is proven. That means 98% people that we have, 98% people go scot free, 98% people are just harassed by the ED. Because when you see the news that ED has questioned this person for 10 hours, ED has questioned this person for 12 hours, so on and so forth, all of that leads to mental harassment. But in the end, if you are only able to prove your crime on 2% of the people, that means most of the time you are being misused. And this is the data that is being given by the government itself. The government itself gave this data in 2022 in the parliament, and the situation has not improved after that, because the law of PMLA makes it so difficult for you to get a bail. Because do you know, under PMLA, why is it that, for example, Arvind Kejriwal is not getting a bail? Why is it that in Delhi, Manish Sisodia is not getting a bail? Because the PMLA law says bail will only be given to you if the ED does not oppose it. Meaning, if ED, Enforcement Directorate, opposes the bail, if ED says to the judge that no, we don't want him to be given the bail, then the bail will not be given. Bail will only be given if the ED does not oppose it. And again, it is very logical. Why would the ED not oppose it? The ED will always oppose it, that I don't want the bail to be given. And that is why getting a bail under PMLA is so difficult in the present circumstances. This was about the ED. Now, one more topic that we have specifically with respect to corruption is about Whistleblowers Protection Act. Priyanka is saying, what is Section 45 of PMLA? See, Section 45 of PMLA, I'll just tell you here. One of the other things that makes PMLA such a difficult law is, you would have seen, heard at least, or seen in the judiciary. Judiciary follows a concept of innocent until proven guilty, right? You are innocent until proven guilty. This is usual. This is the usual case, that in usually you are proven, you are innocent until the opposition can prove that you are guilty. But Section 45 of PMLA is exactly the opposite. This says that you have to prove your innocence. You have to prove your innocence. In order to get even a bail, you have to first prove your innocence. That means, rather than the government or the ED proving that you are guilty, you have to prove that I am not guilty. And that is a very difficult thing to do. For example, if I take you to the court and I say that you murdered someone, the court will say, now you prove that you have not murdered. That is how the law works. If the ED says you have murdered someone, it is considered that yes, you have murdered now. Now the responsibility is on you to prove your innocence. And that is why it is such a difficult law. The PML is such a difficult law to get the bail under it. That is why it is so difficult. The next part that we have is a law that is required, called the Whistleblowers Protection Act. Whistleblowers Protection Act is a law that was passed in 2014. Now, what exactly is this? Who are whistleblowers? Let's try and understand that. Whistleblowers are those who bring out the news of corruption, who bring out the news of corruption or something wrong, some mishappening. They are the ones who bring it to light. Now, who are these people in front of you? There are some well-known whistleblowers. This is Satyendra Dubey. This is Dr. Wen Liang. This is Edward Snowden. Now, who are these people? Satyendra Dubey. He was an engineer working with NHAI, National Highway Authority of India. Atal Bihari Vajpayee ran a very big project called the Golden Quadrilateral. Golden Quadrilateral project was to build big highways connecting Delhi, Mumbai, Chennai, and Kolkata. That was a big quadrilateral, the golden quadrilateral. He was an engineer here. He was responsible for one of the sections in Bihar. Now, what happened was, if you actually see, when he was the engineer, under him some contractors were working. He saw there was wide scale corruption. He reported corruption in NHAI. He saw that many contractors who have been given the contract to build the roads are not doing their job properly. He brought it to light. He was given threats by the contractors that we will kill you if you bring this news, but he was not worried. He even wrote letters to the prime minister at that point of time, but no one listened to him. Ultimately, he was killed. He was murdered by the people who were hired by the contractors. Dr. Wen Liang. Who is he? He was the doctor who basically told the world about COVID-19 virus. When China was hiding that a new virus has come up, when China was not telling the world that a new virus is killing people in China, he was the one who basically told the people that something wrong is happening in China. He was jailed by the Chinese government. He died in the jail because of COVID-19 itself. He was never given any treatment. Edward Snowden. Who is he? Worked for the American government. Thankfully, he's still alive, but he's not in the US, he's in Russia. Worked for the US government. He told the world that the US government listens to everyone. US government reads the emails and listens to the phone calls of its own citizens. He had to run away from his country. He had to hide in Russia. These are some examples of whistleblowers. Whistleblowers are people who bring out the news and the issues of corruption. They are called the whistleblowers. Now, in order to protect them, it's important to protect their identity. It's important to make sure that their identity is not disclosed to anyone. That is why we require a law called the Whistleblowers Protection Act. Whistleblower Protection Act, in simple terms, means that the identity of the person who is complaining will be hidden. If you file a complaint, your identity will not be told to anyone so that you are safe. We discussed about the Vyapam scam. We discussed about these cases, and these are not the only ones. There's so many other officers. See, the worst that can happen to them is that they get killed. But even if they don't get killed, they face issues of transfer, they face issues of harassment, they may be suspended on wrong charges. A lot of things can happen. And that is why it is important to protect the identity of the whistleblowers. Now, there are two types of whistleblowers. Internal means who are working in that department itself, and external basically means who are not working, who are from outside, those who come to know about the corruption. In both these cases, the law applies. In both these cases, if you file a complaint, you will be protected. Now, please understand the problem here. The Whistleblower Protection Act says that if you file a complaint against any public servant, any person, or who any NGO, etc., that is supported by the government, if you make a complaint to the Vigilance Commission, then your name will not be disclosed to anyone. Means the problem is, if you file a complaint to the police, or even if you file a complaint to the Lokpal, in these cases, your name will not be hidden. Please understand this. The law says your name will remain hidden only and only when your complaint is filed to the Vigilance Commission. Only when it is the Vigilance Commission, if you file a complaint to them, then your name will be hidden. But if you file a complaint to police, if you file a complaint to the Lokpal, then your name will not be hidden. That is a big loophole. Now, does that mean while filing a complaint, you don't have to tell your name? No, it does not mean that. Please understand. When you file a complaint, you have to tell your name, but they assure you that we will not tell your name to anyone else. Remember those old movies that we used to see? Someone would call the police that this is happening at that time, and police will ask, "Who are you?" And you will say, "I'm your well wisher," and they cut the phone. This used to happen in old movies. Similar to this, You cannot file a complaint without your name. You have to give your name, but the police assures you or the CVC assures you that your name will not be told to anyone. If you make false complaints, if you make false complaints, then you can also be penalized for that. There are penalties involved for making a false complaint. If you knew that this is false information, still you're filing a complaint, that means you can also be punished. So if any one of you is misusing the law, then you can also be punished under this particular law. Now, does it mean that your name will not be disclosed to anyone? Let's say you file a complaint. The complaint is that you went to take license to open up a medical store, and the officer who has to give the license has asked for a bribe of 5 crore rupees. Let's say you have to file this complaint. Does it mean that your name will not be told to anyone? No. This is the problem. Your name might be told to the head of the department against whom you are filing the complaint. If you're filing a complaint against a specific department, the head of that department will get to know your name. That is also a big problem, because even if one person comes to know the name, then there is always a danger that the information can pass on. It is human nature. You tell a secret to someone and you tell them, please don't tell anyone, please don't tell anyone, and they will tell it to someone else. So even if your name is disclosed to one single person, that makes it problematic. So your name will not be kept 100% hidden. Your name will be told to whom? To the head of that department against whom you are filing the complaint. Apart from this, the act also puts a penalty, as I said, for disclosing identity. If someone mistakenly discloses the identity, if someone tells your identity of the complainant to someone, there will be a punishment given to them as well. All these are issues in this particular act. There are some other issues that still remain. There is no penalty for victimizing a complainant. Victimizing a complainant means harassing the complainant. If the person who has filed the complaint, he himself is being harassed, there is no punishment for that. CVC only has powers to make recommendation, as we discussed. Even if you file a complaint by taking danger and the complaint files the person to be corrupt, even then the CVC cannot take any action, they can only recommend. The whistleblower does not get any incentive. Even if you put your life in danger to bring this issue into public domain, even then you will not get any incentive out of it. You will not gain anything out of it. There is no time limit for CVC to conduct an inquiry. Even if you file a complaint, CVC can take its own time. They can take many weeks, they can take many months to conduct an inquiry. And in this time period, what happens to you, no one knows. How will you be saved? How will you actually make sure that no one comes to know about you? That is also a big problem. Other problem, it only covers public servants. Means if you have any news of corruption in the private sector, this law does not apply to you. Why? Because if you have a news of corruption in the private sector, CVC cannot do anything. You can file a complaint to the CVC. The CVC will only look into complaints against the public servants, and the CVC here cannot really do anything against the private sector players. And this is also a big issue. If you have any corruption complaint against the private sector, nothing specifically can be done. As you can see here, I gave you the example of Vyapam scam earlier as well. In the Vyapam scam, many people have been killed. Most of the cases have remained unresolved. Most of these deaths have been extremely mysterious. We have not seen any solution to that. That is why laws such as a Whistleblower Protection Act is extremely important. One more thing here. There are also complaints by RTI activists that if I file an RTI, my life is also in danger. Many RTI activists also want that RTI should also be included in the Whistleblower Protection Act, meaning that RTI activists want that their identity also should not be disclosed. Why? Because RTI activists think that if we ask a difficult question to the government, if we ask a difficult question to the department, our lives can also get into danger. So they have been demanding, that is, the RTI activists have been demanding that the Whistleblower Protection Act should also protect the identity of the whistleblowers, but right now that is not the case. Do remember, right now that is not the case. Right now, if you file an RTI, your identity will be disclosed. The department where you're filing the RTI will get to know your name, will get to know who you are. Your identity will not be kept a secret. If you're filing the RTI, do remember that. Your identity will only be kept a secret if you are filing a complaint to the CVC. Remember that. Even if you file a complaint to Lokpal or the police, there is no guarantee that your identity will be kept a secret. Here are certain suggestions to improve the Whistleblower Protection Act: create more awareness amongst the employees of the government department that they don't have to disclose any information, and if they find any corruption, they can become the whistleblowers also. Model act should be placed for private sector also, for private sector as well. If there are corruption related issues, for example, scams have come up, let's say there is a big company under whom something wrong is happening, some employees know about this, they should be allowed to come out in the open in the private sector, as well as the Whistleblower Protection Act should protect them. There should be some incentives given to people who are coming out in the open as whistleblowers. Harassment or victimization should be defined and it should be prohibited so that we all know. And there should be a better method to file or to deal with false complaints. Frivolous or false complaints that are filed by many people, they they just take up a lot of time of the government departments. They create a lot more trouble for the government. They create a lot of pressure on the government officials. All of that should be avoided, and there should be a much better method to ensure that all these complaints are looked into. All these are suggestions. If there are suggestions asked from you in the mains examination, you can write about these suggestions about the Whistleblower Protection Act. I have a couple of practice questions for you. If you want, you can try and answer that as well and see if you are able to answer this. This will all be in the PPT that you will get. These are some practice questions. Practice questions are from those that we have already studied. This brings to the end of today's class. We have a few minutes. I'll take up a few questions if you have some. If you don't have any questions, you're free to leave in that case. Sunny is saying, what if corruption has really happened but not proven? Sunny, if something has not been proven, that means it has not happened. Full stop. Gagan is saying low conviction rate in ED can be attributed to those people being honest or ED being incompetent to prove. Gagan, if we knew the answer to that, we would have been in a much better position. So no one knows the answer to that. You can only make assumptions. You can only make assumptions that either the people are honest and they're too smart, or ED is not competent enough. Again, these are assumptions. Even if you write that in the examination, just make an assumption and clarify this. Don't make this as a finding that you have, unless the Supreme Court, for example, says that ED, let's say, is incompetent. You should not write that. Lakshmi, the next class I think is about e-governance, if I'm correct. Fatima is saying, how do people get illegal money converted into legal money? Fatima, I don't know. If I knew this, I would have been earning a lot more money. They usually do this by buying assets, um, jewelry, properties, something where people invest a lot of money when they get black money. So that is how. And what happens is you open up a, for example, let's say you have a lot of cash with you. And when someone asks you from where did you get this money, you, let's say, open up a shop, open up a restaurant, and you make a excuse that I'm earning this money from my restaurant, where many people come in, they give me payment in cash. That is how you basically build an excuse. That is how it usually converts from black money to white money. Vanshika is saying private organization does not come under ED. No, Vanshika, see, ED is not about organization. ED is about money laundering. Anyone who is laundering any money, ED will take action against them. Doesn't matter if you're a public servant or you're a private citizen, even if you don't work for the government, even if you are a private citizen and you're laundering money, ED will take action against you. Sakshi, yes, if the head of the department discloses the name of the whistleblower, there will be punishment involved there. Punishment is given for disclosing the name. Anyone who discloses the name will be covered under that. Karan saying, what is the logic behind making whistleblower name visible to our department? Gagan, I fail to see any logic. Maybe the government thinks that it will help in investigating the case better. It will help in understanding whether the complaint is true or not, but I don't see any logic behind it. Neither has the government clarified any logic. Vanshika, no, 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 that is not true. All right, then. The SME is still here to answer your questions for a few minutes. You can keep asking them. I'll see you tomorrow then. Do join in at 6 a.m. for the next session. We will meet for session number 5. Thank you so much. Bye bye. Jai Hind.